Hi, welcome to our vlog, and we're going to be looking at how to navigate intense feelings in a relationship. So
You're going to be looking at me, I assume, because I haven't done a vlog for a while. So I guess I've been brought into the affray to hopefully add some pearls of wisdom.
yes,
Maybe.
well,
I
you
don't
know
know.
that I've been answering questions that people have been sending in, and for this one specific question, the person asked for your feedback, and so I asked you if you would join me.
Ah, okay.
So, what would you like to share about what you've learned and seen around navigating intense feelings in a relationship? And I want to be clear, I know that I have intense feelings too, so I'm definitely going to put my 2 cents worth in. But
Okay.
let's start with you.
Well, on my better days, when I can maybe get a little bit of altitude on the situation, it quite now often occurs to me to sort of see the indicator of a feeling rather than get caught up in a sort of an old narrative, if that makes sense. So something might happen, you might do something that's not to my liking, and maybe there's a habit around that for me where I might go into an old habitual response. And I think that I've got a lot better these days, rather than go into the old habitual response, to feel the feeling, which is generally hurt, and allow myself to experience that. And there's something about that that stops me from jumping on board the old train of thought that has that habitual habit. And it gives me a moment. I mean, it gives me a moment to take a breath, to have what ostensibly is a different experience. I'm just trying to think if
Can I ask you a
ostensibly is the
question?
right word to use there, but we can look that up later.
Exactly. You have a very good vocabulary. I'm sure it's right. Can I ask you a question? So, was that a yes?
Yes, yes. I was still thinking about ostensibly.
In terms of you thinking of your younger self
Mm-hmm.
when you weren't at this place that you're at now, is that what you would say to your younger self who was struggling with not acting out from reactivity?
Yeah, well, I think younger people are, and I don't know how. I mean, I think I'm talking about really young people,
Like five?
like
Like what
kids.
age are you thinking?
They're really good at feeling their feelings in a very sort of unabashed way. They express themselves. As adults, we get more sophisticated and conditioned to think it's not good to express our feelings. So I think we circumnavigate those with conditioned behaviour, and my behaviour, as questionable as it is in those moments where I act out with you, that nevertheless is how I would react. So me getting a hold of that understanding and seeing that that's my conditioned behavior and knowing that is now allowing me to sort of get more tuned into the feeling that is actually emerging and hang out there rather than just sort of jump into the old habitual response. It's kind of like, for me, it's seeing the early signs of a feeling. I kind of, the metaphor that just has emerged for me around this, it's kind of like when you're on a freeway here in the US, and there's one particular freeway, the 405, that I find myself traveling on from time to time, and there is a what do you call it, a carpool lane.
Okay.
So I'm going to suggest that the carpool lane is kind of like relationship. I have a relationship carpool lane, and I'm driving up the 405, and quite often the GPS is telling me that you now need to get onto the 10. So I'm in the carpool lane, and there's like 6 lanes of traffic to get over to the 10, and there are lines that are broken in the road that are the point of exit. So for me, if I don't do that early enough and the line gets unbroken, once the line is unbroken, you're staying in the carpool lane and you're having to drive straight into the valley. So there is a very it's not like there's a small window. There's quite a large window of broken lines. I'm suggesting that for me is the indicator that I need to pull over and exit from this current feeling that I'm experiencing. No, sorry, not that I have to exit from this current feeling. I have to exit from the allure of that old habitual conditioning that wants me to respond in a way that probably is not going to be helpful. But the feeling for me is kind of like the broken line in the road. It's now time to think about pulling over, about settling down, And that has been a game changer for me.
So let me make sure I'm understanding the metaphor.
Okay.
So what your advice would be to your younger self is that when you're more in tune with your emotional experience, you start to notice earlier on when you're starting to feel reactive.
Yeah.
And that would be equivalent to where there's the dotted lines.
The dotted line. Let's call it a dotted line.
If you want to call it.
Okay.
So is that right?
Yes.
I'm following?
Yeah.
And so that when we are in tune with our emotional experience and we notice that early, there's a window, like in the carpool lane, that we have to take care of ourselves. And that what can happen, though, is if we don't pay attention during that window, the line becomes undotted, and it's kind of
stuck.
Inevitable outcome.
You're on a road to nowhere,
Okay.
or the valley, which is kind of the same thing. Or certain people in LA think that. I actually love the valley.
What I hear you saying is that when we're dealing with intense feelings, what's most important is that we notice the early warning signals of our emotions to let us know to take care of ourselves sooner rather than later, and then we will be much more able to avoid outbursts of reactivity that cause damage to the relationship.
And to give some more weight to what I was saying earlier about allowing ourselves to feel the feeling, and this is kind of, I guess I hope we've got time. I've got a fairly long story, so I hope it's okay.
Go ahead.
So there was this experience I had, I think it's probably a couple of years back, where I'd been working at the treatment centre. I had driven home with this sort of real urgent need to sit down and watch the Champions League that I had recorded with my team Chelsea playing. So I was really excited about that. But I come home and I know it's my turn to cook. So I think, well, I'll have to get the cooking on the stove before I can actually sit down and enjoy the Champions League. I come into the kitchen is just absolute chaos. The sink is in an awful state. There's a whole bunch of washing up. Kids have made a complete mess. And I like a clean canvas when I do the cooking. So I have to have the kitchen clean before I even begin that exercise. So I'm furious about the fact that I have to do all the washing up and clean the kitchen, blah blah blah. Takes me about 40 minutes. Finally get the cooking, going on the stove. Feel like, okay, now I've done everything I can do. I can now go and enjoy the Champions League. About an hour of my time, when I was hoping it would have been 15 minutes, was taken up with cleaning up the kitchen. Having done all that, I thought, great, fantastic. So I went to the fridge, got out some lemonade, and got like a pint glass because I was really thirsty and hot. Poured this pint glass of lemonade, put a whole bunch of ice in it, went to sip it, and just as I went to sip it, it fell out of my hand and smashed into a million pieces on the floor. And so there are pets and things, and I have to, it basically would necessitate probably a very intricate cleanup job that was going to take a long time. And so there was this sudden pulse inside of me of just sheer anger and frustration. But I think that this is kind of where my conditioning has now got to. In the past, I would have gone absolutely apeshit and gone nuts because I was so wanting to watch this game. But the pulse of that feeling was just something that was interesting and something that I got curious about. So I actually allowed myself to feel the feeling. In that allowance of allowing myself to feel the feeling, I wasn't getting on board that old train of thought, which would have had me go apeshit. And I was actually allowed myself to feel the feeling and kind of like let that wave move through me, rather than let that wave of thought grip me and hold me and keep me probably stamping like a child for half an hour, swearing blue murder. And instead, it's like I allowed that wave to move through me. And once the wave had moved through me, it seemed like you know what, don't waste any more time having a hissy fit. Just get the job done and then you'll sit down. So I think that's kind of where I'm at now. It's like I'm more curious about what is the feeling, what is my biology telling me in this moment, rather than get gripped by an old narrative, which is basically an old illusion that I've kind of allowed myself to get gripped by.
Okay, so there's a part two to your metaphor.
Okay, there is a part two. There are two metaphors. Which is
that we can recognize the early signals of dysregulation and take care of ourselves. Pull over, as you're saying. Take care of ourselves. But there's still hope. If either we don't pay attention and we find ourselves in that lane without an exit, Or if it just happens so quickly, because sometimes it does, something like that happens and it is so out of the blue.
Yeah.
You didn't realize how dysregulated you were, and it just took a little thing to, tip you over the edge. And when that happens, what I hear you saying is that the more we can simply be with the experience and not get caught up in the narrative about the experience, then we will be able to contain that internal experience, even though it's intense, without acting out from it.
Yeah, no, exactly. And for me, that helps me to stabilize. And I've noticed for myself how that, that's something that I get better at as I get older. And it's just something that I remember more often than not. And has been a game changer.
Yeah. I think that's great. Well, hopefully that answers your question, and I think that's all we have time for today.
Okay.
So we're sending you lots of love, and please send in your questions. Take care.
Lots of love.
Bye.
Bye.